chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello. This is the podcast DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. My name is Manuel Ochsenreiter. I'm editor-in-chief of the German news magazine Zuerst. And I am talking again, as usual and always, to my friend and colleague from Poland, Mateusz Piskorski. Hello, Mateusz. How is Corona in Poland?
Hello. Well, Corona is quite well, and it's spreading because now we have times of street protests and revolution.
Oh, it's good to hear. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So when it comes to Corona, the situation is really, developing in a direction quite good for the virus.
Good for yes. Virus is geopolitically very successful, we can say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So, but today we will speak about another ideology, which is is it as successful as coronavirus, or can this ideology still learn from coronavirus? What would you say?
Well, it might be quite offensive for the people who are following this ideology to be compared to coronavirus. But anyway, I have already heard some comparisons that it's a kind of a virus.
But if I do hear an offense, it is always not on purpose, and I apologize. It's never on purpose.
We both apologize.
Yes, of course. So we will speak today about Turanism, and how would you define Turanism, or yes, can we call? Is there another name? No, it's in German. I think it's Turanismus. Huh?
Yes, I mean everyone has the notion of Turan, yes, as a civilization, as a part of let's say Eurasian tradition, because it is a Eurasian tradition actually. Yes, if we simply look at the map and the spread of let's say people who are somehow connected with the idea and the civilization of Turan. But anyway, it's in contemporary times it's used, or some claim that it's even abused by Turkey as such for foreign policy reasons. And I think that the Turkish foreign policy is a quite effective combination, a synthesis of on the one hand the Neo-Ottomanism, as we know. On the other hand, there is pan-Islamism, as we also know, and we have the third element of all those strategy. All this strategy in the foreign policy of Turkey, it's pan-Turanism. Yes, so in places where they cannot appeal to pan-Islamism and pan-Ottomanism because of the lack of traditions, they might always use the pan-Turanism as an idea. Yes.
What seems interesting to me is that Ankara or the Turkish elite seems to have managed to unite these three ideologies or these three traditions you mentioned in one comprehensive box. So even if these ideologies might object each other here and there in details, can we say that they really managed to combine them to an harmonious system?
Yes, definitely yes, and I think that the main author of this effective strategy is Ahmet Davutoglu. You remember the guy? He was prime minister and
foreign minister also, right? I don't know.
Yes. For a long period, he was a minister of foreign affairs of Turkey. Already in the beginning of the 21st century, he has written a book which was called, if I'm not wrong, it was called Strategic Depth. Mm-hmm. And in this book, he was really trying to successfully combine all those currents, all those, let's say, ideological foundations, three different ideological pillars of Turkish foreign policy. I guess that he could be perceived as a real intellectual author and inspiration of the policy which is continued now, regardless the fact that Davutoglu is no longer a member of the government. He was even expelled from the governing party last year, I think. Anyway, from the intellectual point of view, from the theoretical point of view, he might be perceived as a founder of the three pillars strategy of the foreign policy of Turkey. So, they can use the pan-Turanism in different places. The pan-Turanism, I would say, was almost completely dominated as a current of geopolitical thought by the Turks now, regardless also the fact that before it was quite spread in totally different countries, like in Finland and Hungary.
And Japan, for example, also.
Yes. But it was quite interesting when it comes to Hungary. I was even talking with the people who used to organize the World Kurultai, as they call that, the World Parliament of the Turanic people, somewhere near Budapest, yes, several times. I think they are still organizing that. There were two ideas in Hungary, as we all know. One was about their, let's say, Ugro-Finnic origins, and the second one was the Turanic one. And the Turanic one seemed to be even more effective. I guess it was somehow also supported by Turkey. All those events like the World Kurultai organized there by the Hungarians was also supported financially, politically, logistically by Turkey as well. Yes, why the idea as such might be, let's say, quite dangerous for Eurasia, because it might also lead to destabilization in Russia. What do you think about that? The pan-Turanism as such might be used and abused by Turkey in different parts of the globe, of course, but mainly on the post-Soviet area, I guess.
Yes, I think this concept can be a destabilization for whole Eurasia, not just for Russia, since Turkey, as the main carrier of this ideology, is at the same time not a sovereign independent country, but it is, how shall I say, is that as NATO member and as close to the American entity country. I would say it's far from independent, but it likes to act as independent. A little bit like Germany, but Germany is in these things not that radical. But what is, in my opinion, important is that we very, very shortly, also for the listeners, go back to the origin of pan-Turanism. And you spoke about these three important concepts: the pan-Ottomanism, the pan-Islamism, and pan-Turanism. And the pan-Turanism is the ethnic concept from these three. The other two are, I would say the pan-Ottomanism is maybe more a state traditionalist concept, of course, also with Islamic element. Pan-Islamism is, as the name says, a religious concept. But the pan-Turanism is a decisive ethnic concept. That means they include really everyone they include to the Turan, or they see as the Turan people. That can be people who speak, for example, language which is related to the Turkish language, as we have, for example, in Azerbaijan, just as one of example. But it can go even to Western China, where the Uyghur people, which are also, of course, part of the Turanic concept. We said there are Turanic ethnic thinkers who even would include Japan into this concept. So the danger is, of course, that this can be like a Trojan horse also for even another influence, which is then not on the surface, called Turanic. This is one of the main dangers I see, and I think that that might be also now a little bit unexpected that I say this. I think that for a Eurasianist concept, the concentration, the only concentration on ethnicity is not leading anywhere. I think it just leads into conflicts, as we see, for example, right now in Southern Caucasus, where, in my opinion, the Turanic thinking is also playing a role there under the surface. Of course, there is it's not the main engine or the main reactor which is pushing for what is happening there. But I think it is mainly for now a conflict ideology. It doesn't bring harmony in Eurasia. Or what is your opinion? Maybe that was now a little bit too fed up what I said. I don't know.
No, I think you're right, but well, it's really, you can see that in Nagorno-Karabakh conflict.
Yeah.
That it's really used particularly, I mean, the pan-Turanism as an argument is really used particularly in the post-Soviet area. Why? Well, it's very simple. You cannot use the Neo-Ottomanism there because only a small part of the post-Soviet area was somehow controlled in times of the Ottomans by Turkey. You cannot use pan-Islamism there because of the Soviet heritage and because of the fact that the, let's say, religious activity of the people is relatively small compared to other countries, other Muslim countries. So the only ideological instrument which might be effectively used is pan-Turanism as such. That's why, well, concerning, for instance, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, you can see the rhetorics of the Turkish government that they are supporting their blood brothers, yes. They are supporting the people who are also Turkish and their brothers when it comes to ethnicity, yes. So this element, this ethnic element, is used particularly when it comes to Nagorno-Karabakh. But of course, not only, also for instance, you mentioned the Uyghurs. I think that using only the pan-Islamism for, let's say, inspiring the Uyghurs for all their actions would be not so effective if the Turks would not use also the pan-Turanism as an ideology for them. Yes?
Absolutely. And we shouldn't forget, for pan-Islamism, Turkey is not needed at all. Yeah? There are much closer Islamic countries to the Uyghurs than Turkey.
Yes, exactly. So I think that the main targets of pan-Turanism as an offensive tool of geopolitics, of Turkish foreign policy nowadays, are the Uyghurs, so the Xinjiang province in China, and all the Central Asian countries, plus Azerbaijan. Yeah? We have also the activities, quite vigorous activities of Turkey and different institutions of Turkish state in Central Asia traditionally. Well, we have, for instance, even during the last crisis in Kyrgyzstan, you could also trace some Turkish involvement there, as they are also building their potential and political possibilities there. And from the geopolitical point of view, pan-Turanism as whole Turkish foreign policy and Turkish geopolitical strategy in Eurasia is directed against the Russian interests, particularly, and Chinese interests. Yes. Particularly in Central Asia, you can see the confrontation between all those three powers, the three centers of power, geopolitical power, and one of them is using that ideology. The others, actually, I mean Russia and China, if you compare them to Turkey, they don't have any, let's say, ideological offer for the people there. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's their disadvantage compared to Turkey. That's why this ideology of pan-Turanism seems to be quite effective. There's also another question, but this is a question for another discussion, I guess. There's a question, I mean, you have told that in several cases, the pan-Turanism as well as pan-Ottomanism and pan-Islamism of Turkish foreign policy might be a tool of NATO or United States, as Turkey is a member of NATO, yes?
Yeah.
But there's also another question to be discussed another time, I guess. The question about the possibilities for Turkey, the prospects for Turkey to get, let's say, more or less independence from the United States, yes? To become a more or less sovereign geopolitical player. I think now
I need to interfere. But yes, I know what you are going to say, and I know what you want to say. But don't you see exactly the forces which are enforcing that development in the socialist camp, which is not Neo-Ottomanic, not Islamic, and not Turanic at all? That is this independence from US.
Well, yes. Actually, I think it's particularly the demand of, let's say, left-wing nationalism and Kemalism, yes?
Yes.
They're in Turkey. Of course, they are expressing that. But on the other hand, some decisions might prove that at least some part of the Turkish elite is thinking about getting a little piece of sovereignty. I'm not talking about 100% independence from the United States, yes? I'm just talking that in some cases, as we have already discussed in our previous podcasts, in some cases it seems that they were more or less at odds with the American interests in some places of the world, yes? Yes, from the ideological point of view, from the point of view of a very clear political program, you are right that the idea of independence from the United States as such and of becoming a sovereign player is openly voiced only by those circles.
And I have to say something else when we speak about pan-Turanism. To me, pan-Turanism, especially today, seems a little bit like, well, how shall I express it? That it doesn't sound too mean and too negative, but it looks to me like a very, very mutated comic version of, for example, historical pan-Slavism, to say it like this. Why do I say this? Because now, especially since the war around Nagorno-Karabakh and the Southern Caucasus, I was really watching as much as I could Turanist propaganda, I would call it. So trying to see as much as I can. Like there are a lot of music videos, military videos. I mean, it seems to me they are uploading 24/7 on YouTube, where you see then Turkish and Azerbaijani soldiers together. It seems to me a little bit really like a comic, yeah? Like they want to deliver a message, but don't know the content the content is only the ethnicity, yeah. While we know that the pan-Slavism, which had its biggest times, I would say, more than 100 years ago, when there were their Balkan wars and also then in World War I. I mean, that was a whole concept, and to me, but also the pan-Islamism and also the pan-Ottomanism, what Turkey is pushing for, seems to me like a huge costume party, like a huge comic, little bit reminding about the colorful and great times of the Sultan or of some preachers, or in that term of the great heroic Turanic tribes. But at the end, it is always about that Turkey has some very, very good and economic deals of advantage in these countries we mentioned already, also in all the stans like Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and so on. But there is, it is like the Trojan horse for some good business deals. Or how would you say? I don't see the real concept behind. I see it is like, it seems to me like today like a comic ideology without real content.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think that there are some, let's say, thinkers and intellectuals who really understand and embrace and express the ideology of Pan-Turanism, of course. But, it's a kind of mass culture instrument now in the Turkish propaganda, of course. You cannot compare that to Pan-Slavism and to the times of 19th century, because Pan-Slavism was, let's say, targeted at attracting the intellectuals and elites and political elites, yes?
Yes.
Pan-Turanism nowadays is used as a tool to attract the masses. So that's why it's. I agree with you that it's so seems to be so primitive and seems to be on the level of a comic. You know? They don't need to present to the masses sophisticated ideology. Actually, you are right. It is used and abused for achieving their day-to-day political goals, yes? Yeah. So it doesn't have to be sophisticated, it doesn't have to be elaborated as a complex ideology. It is just a tool. It is just a tool as well, actually, as the other ideas like Neo-Ottomanism. Yes?
Yeah.
It's also very, let's say, a primitive interpretation of a certain geopolitical tradition. Well, anyway, it works. Yes. It seems to work. This is the problem of another interesting issue to be discussed also maybe by us in the future. The issue of the legitimacy and of foreign policy in the eyes of the people, of getting the support of ordinary people, ordinary citizens for foreign policy of a given country. Sometimes you use ideology as a tool to attract the people and to make people support your foreign policy or your geopolitical strategy.
And because you asked, all these three pillars, ideological pillars, Pan-Turanism, Pan-Islamism, and Pan-Ottomanism are in their genetical code, they must be anti-Russian, and not to forget, they must be anti-European, because all of the three ideologies were, they refer to their origins and to their history, and they were in their origins and in their history, of course, always directed against Russia and against the European states. Except those who were going into contemporary alliances with the Ottoman Empire. But in generally, it is these are all three expansive ideologies which are aggressively directed against against Europe and Russia.
Well, they are actually directed, and they are one of the threats for Eurasia as such, as you have already mentioned, for the stability of Eurasia. That's why it's quite probable, and I don't exclude the possibility that they are actually used by external forces. Yes, you have told that they might be used by external players like United States, for instance. Yes, it's a very effective tool. well, if you compare it, if you try to locate some main ideas of the strategy of Zbigniew Brzeziński from the past, from his grand chessboard, yes, I think that you can find there a lot of ideas which are quite similar to the ideas promoted by Pan-Turanism as such, as an instrument to destabilize China and Russia, first and foremost. So, yes, the ideology as such is a kind of, let's say, legitimization of an aggressive foreign policy in Eurasia, aggressive foreign Turkish policy in Eurasia. We are witnessing now all this situation. I mean, it became very clear in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict because some of the Turkish officials have already proposed an idea which sounds quite abstract for the moment being, but, well, maybe it could be a kind of a long strategy that they would like to establish, let's say, common Turanic or pan-Turkish armed forces. Mm. I mean, the army which would consist of course, first and foremost of the Turkish military, of Azerbaijani military, but then also they would create a kind of, a common military bloc, which would also include, and to which they would also invite some, for instance, Central Asian countries, yes? And that could be quite destabilizing and dangerous, actually.
So, but it's still not as dangerous as pan-colonialism, right?
Yes, of course. we still have our territorial claims when it comes to Bhutan.
Yes. Yes, I was about to ask how is the war going, but since you were not mentioning it by yourself, I thought it's maybe a little bit embarrassing. Maybe the Bhutan forces are they already in Krakow?
It's one of the frozen conflicts now.
No, but I was, in my mind, I was always comparing, of course, pan-Turanism. I mean, we had these pan-nationalist movements. I think they're big times where maybe 100 or 150 years ago, and of course we had also pan-Germanism, and I was, of course, yes, and I was thinking about, well, how would it look like today to do pan-Germanism in the way pan-Turanism is done today. And, going to Flanders, going to Denmark, even we go to the Anglo-Saxons, can do this, and to our brothers in South Tyrol, and do some colorful shows how Arminius won the battle against the Roman legions, for example. I mean, pan-Germanism, I think it is not so comparable, but I mean, pan-Turanism has also, if we are honest, it has only the myth as origin.
Yes.
Where we are not sure. Then we have, of course, the linguistic relationship. That we know, the language of Azerbaijan, the Azeri language, is very much related to the Turkish language, but we know that the similarities in the language not necessarily must base on genetical relationship. Now we touch a very, very dangerous topic for me as a German, so I have to be very, 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 very careful. But I mean, you know what I want to say, so that the Uyghur people maybe has some similarities in language with Turkish language, is not 100% necessarily a forensic proof of they come all from the same region. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, as you have already told, the pan-Turanism as such, compared to pan-Germanism and pan-Slavism from the past, is quite primitive, and I don't think they They have to acknowledge the facts constructing their ideology. Yes, they ignore the facts often. So anyway, it seems to be effective. By the way, it could be quite interesting what you have told right now. I mean, to try to revive the pan-Germanic idea. What do you think about that?
No, be my partner.
Oh, let me take care of pan-Slavism, okay?
Yeah, pan-colonialism. Come on. Come on.
No, Manuel, it could be dangerous for Germany.
You are again too modest and too humble. No, but
anyway, we shall come back to all those issues. I think of all those pan-ethnic, pan-civilizational ideas.
I mean, the interesting point about pan-Turanism is to me that in the 21st century, when, everyone is enlightened and everyone says, and ethnic concepts don't play any role, that this ideology is the ideology of a part of the elites of a country with a very, very big army and with very, very huge economic helps from Europe and US. Yeah, that makes it overly interesting and spicy, the topic, because come on, if 20 years ago, 20 years ago, we were already born, right? If 20 years ago, someone would have told us that pan-Turanism will play a big role for Turkey again, we would have all said, no way. Huh? So that such a concept can be revived in a very successful way and can play a role. Yeah? That is, I think, one of the interesting points about.
Well, for those, I think that 20 years ago, Turkey was just trying to get association agreement with the European Union. They were using very politically correct language. But they had already in their minds, we didn't know about that, but they had already in their minds those ideas, because I've mentioned at the beginning of our podcast the book of Ahmet Davutoglu.
Yeah.
It was already published in 2001. Yeah, so it's quite an old idea. They are working on that. They are preparing their plans since many years. Although publicly they were trying, really, you are right, that they were all the time, they were trying to be publicly very, let's say, politically correct, not touching any issues of territorial claims, not touching any issues of ethnicity as such, yes, because they were trying, for some time they were trying to become the member of European Union as well.
And it was the time when of the start of the rise of Erdogan. We shouldn't forget this as well. And you remember when Erdogan came to power, he was seen as, well, like a kind of moderate Turkish Christian Democrat,
exactly.
in a Islamic cloth, yeah, to say it like that. And that he was seen as a guy who will bring peace with the Kurds and so on. So it's really quite interesting, yeah, how that could develop.
That situation could be compared to a hypothetical situation where Angela Merkel would start to use pan-Germanic arguments in her speeches, yes,
Brunhilde,
and would voice territorial claims to all the neighbors of Germany.
Yes, since you said that, I wondered already that our new German government claim of no borders is not seen as an aggressive act of us. By our neighbors.
Well, it's quite smart. Yes.
But I think that pan-Turanism will really. Sorry, I have. As maybe some of our listeners know, I have a cat, and the cat was trying to eat my papers. So, just telling that. No, I think that this topic of pan-Turanism will accompany us not just the next years, but maybe the next decades. And I think that if there is really the figure coming who can fill this, as I said, this comic style concept of this pure emotional comic style concept with content, then it can become really dangerous.
Yes, that's why we should analyze the ideology as such, but particularly we should analyze and focus on the ways it is used and made an instrument for the Turkish foreign policy.
It was a pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you so much.
It was great to hear you and speak to you again. And thanks to our listeners for listening to us and give your suggestions when it comes to the topics as well. Hopefully we will have some podcasts which might be let's say a big shock for some people. Yes, in the coming future.
I hope they are already.
Yes, but that's a secret.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.